Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sales Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Daniel McComber, and with me today is Doug Fiefia. He is the founder of Sojo Construction. He's a sales representative for Google, and he is the candidate for the Utah House of Representatives. It's good to have you here, man.
Oh, it's great to be here, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invitation.
Well, it's so awesome how we met, of course. At first, I only knew you as the founder of Sojo Construction.
Yeah.
I reached out to our coaching group and I was like, hey, does anybody know anyone who finishes basements in Utah? Because one of my properties, I wanted to finish it out. And like, oh yeah, Doug. I'm like, wait, isn't that the guy that's like the Utah like politician guy? Like, yeah. I'm like, what is he doing with the side business, man? So of course we met through that. But yeah, I guess you have so many different assets. So you have the founder, and then you have the politician. I guess when you were younger, did you have were one of those more prevalent than the other, or?
Man, if you told me when I was a kid I was going to be in politics, I'd tell you you're crazy. It's the first thing. If you told me I'd own a construction company, I would tell you you're out of your mind. I grew up in a home where my parents immigrated from Tonga, left everything they knew, had us kids here in Utah. We lived in a home with 5 other families. My family were the biggest family. We had 5 kids, so we got the living room. And so I still remember in Kearns, Utah, laying on the hard wood floors, nestled together like little sardines in the cold winter nights to stay warm. And then, in the hot summer nights, my grandpa would take his mattress outside and we would sleep on the front lawn to get free air conditioning.
Wow.
And so those were kind of the humble beginnings. My dad was working, 2 to 3 jobs at all times. And so knowing my dad at a young age he was just kind of this guy who went to work. Mm-hmm. And we'd see him sometimes at night, sometimes early in the morning if we were up early.
When you were young like that and your dad was going to work and whatnot, how long until you kind of realized like, hey, he's not just going to work or like leaving us? Because kids, often see us as fathers just leaving until they get to some point where they realize, oh, he's actually hustling, right? So I mean, was there a turning point like that?
It took a really long time, actually. I mean, really long time in kid years. So like, it wasn't until I was like 11, 12, at about the age of 7, 8, all of us boys went to work with my dad. So that's really where I got to understand, like, what is dad doing? As you said, as little kids, we just think our kids go to work, or our parents go to work, and that's just what they do.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I went to go work with my dad that I was like, dang, this sucks.
Was it construction or what?
It was construction.
Yeah.
So he worked he learned the trade of drywall later. And after a year of working for a business, he decided to go out and start his own business.
Wow.
I mean, very little English, just got a certification, knew how to do the job, didn't know how to win jobs. And so what he would do is he would go to construction sites, made a cheap flyer, and would just say, hey, I'd love to bid on this. I'd love to bid on this. And just, I mean, we talk about people learning the communication skills in door to door. I mean, he was basically doing door to door at different construction sites and would just drive across the state of Utah, saw a construction company working and was like, hey, I can do the drywall for you. And
wow,
slowly but surely kind of built up a clientele, did a lot of work for some of the builders in Utah, and has probably helped with the building of, at least close to 10,000 homes in Utah. I mean, just
wow. And I guess as you being there with him, seeing that, did he kind of ever take you along, going around to the construction sites? And
yeah, that's all I did for the first few years. Is I just was the ride along help with Dad. And the cool thing that I still try to incorporate in my leadership style is my dad, even though he was the owner, the founder, the CEO, and had multiple crews at one time, he always did the jobs that nobody wanted to do. So he was cleaning construction sites as a CEO. So like he would go to the site and he would check, and the owner, the builder would check. They would have a conversation, and then he's like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and clean it up. And they're like, wait, why are you cleaning this? Like almost questioning, like, wait, are you really the CEO or founder? Like,
Yeah.
or are you one man crew and you've been lying to us and
Yeah.
someone did this work? And so they
Yeah.
were confused too, but it just showed me as a leader that you've got to be willing to do everything you're asking your employees and your people to do. And I learned that at a very, very young age, just seeing my dad. And I would even question him, like, Dad, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And he was willing to do the menial jobs and the menial tasks.
What amazing
to show
lessons.
people to, I'm willing to do the hard work too.
Yeah, I mean, what amazing lessons that, he was teaching you guys through his actions, right?
Yeah.
It's that it goes back to that saying, right? I can't hear you because your actions are speaking so loud. And I love that. And it's funny because I grew up kind of similar. I guess when I was a teenager, my mom had this little business that she ran out of our basement, and we would always go to like the not county fairs, but also like the little city parades that Utah does all the time. And she'd have this little booth, and she was selling clothes, and it's so funny because I remember like flyering, and I remember like being at the booth and not just sitting behind the table on my phone. Date myself a little bit. We didn't have it was still a flip phone, I guess, but like going out and like trying to grab people and bring them to the booth. And I was reflecting the other day on that actually because I realized I was like, man, where did my someone asked me. I usually ask people like, hey, where did your entrepreneurial kind of beginning start? And someone finally asked me that question the other day, and I was thinking back, and I was like, holy cow! I guess like since not day one, but really early on, people like me and you through our parents were given these kind of examples and opportunities to do things that are not common.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe you thought it was common. I thought it was pretty common. I'm like, yeah, like kids have opportunities to talk to adults in a professional way, and kids have opportunities to be on site and see adults do business. But as I grow older now, I'm like, no, that's not common at all. So, are there any other kind of lessons that you learned during that time that you kind of reflect on now, or that you feel like you were super helpful in you and your upbringing?
Yeah. So a couple things. So there was a turning point where I was working with my dad, and it's the summer. I played sports growing up, and everyone is having fun. They're swimming, riding bikes, and I'm at work with my dad all day, every day in the summer. And there was one particular hot summer day in Utah. We're cleaning construction sites, and I was just done. I was so mad at this point and just frustrated. Like, why am I here when all my friends are playing? They came over. Hey, we're gonna go do this tomorrow. Can you come? And it's like, no, I gotta go to work with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And got to the point where you're so mad you're about to cry as a kid.
Yeah.
But you like just can't.
Yeah.
You're just like so
The
frustrated.
lip quiver, just
Yeah. And I know that if I were to quit on my dad that day, like he would allow me to go sit in the truck in the AC and just like wouldn't say anything. The only thing that kept me working was seeing how hard my dad was working.
Yeah.
And no sign of complaint, nothing, just not phased. And that's kind of the MO of my dad.
Yeah.
Well, we get in the truck on the way home, and I said, Dad, why do you work so hard? What is this all for? Right? Kind of being the kid who doesn't understand what is work, what is money. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, son, the reason why we work so hard is so that you can get an education and you can be better than us. And that was the first time in my 12-year-old kind of child brain that I really understood, oh, my parents are actually doing this for me. Like, they weren't just working. It just isn't something that parents do, just go to work all day, all night, and come back. It was something they were actually doing for us kids. And that's I think the turning point in my mind that was, hey, if I'm going to go to school, I've got to pay attention in the classroom. If I'm going to actually play sports, this is not something that's expected. It's a luxury. So I better do my best and work hard on the field and off the field to make sure that this sacrifice that my parents have made to pay for this, that I'm actually putting forth the effort that is matched to their effort,
I love that.
at work. And so that kind of early lesson, it's a conversation I'm sure my dad doesn't remember, but it was something that changed my life and is something that I continue to keep fresh in my mind because it has been my driving force, for many, many years. And
Yeah.
it's something that I like to just always remember because, you know, we've been blessed with so much now.
Hmm.
Our kids have the toys and the
Yeah.
technology and everything that we didn't have as kids. And it's just good to remember the sacrifice that was made so that we could be sitting here on a Monday afternoon
Yeah.
doing a podcast instead of, at a construction site cleaning
Yeah.
it up, right?
100-degree
So that
weather.
we could provide for our families. And so,
I love that tie in there. And I was going to ask actually too, because I feel like I was listening to Chris Williamson's podcast the other day, and he had a guest on that was talking about like happiness, right? And there's a certain level of happiness that you get from accomplishing things, from doing something that's hard. And then there's also a certain level of happiness that you get from feeling like you worked hard and you did something and you deserved the outcome, as opposed to being given everything. And so, just out of curiosity, since it's kind of fresh on my mind, now that you are at a place where you are, right, you're doing pretty good, and we'll rewind in a bit in a second, but you have a few kids. How many kids do you have again?
we have four.
4 kids. How old is your oldest?
She's 11.
She's 11.
Yeah.
So that's at that age, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
probably look at your daughter now like, holy cow, this is a different life than the one I had growing up. So I'm curious, what lessons are you teaching your kids, or what are some of the things that you're doing to help cultivate this kind of hard work attitude, mentality, and also what are you doing to kind of help them see the value of the hard work and the money aspect of it?
Yeah. I've tried to include my kids in every aspect of business, in investing. Um, my girls do ride-alongs with me. We'll go
Oh.
look at different sites, and I'll teach them what I'm doing,
Hmm.
right? And we'll have discussions after, like, Dad, that was so long. You were in there for an hour. And I said, well, the reason why is because this is how we win jobs. I was measuring the basement, but I was also making sure that we win this bit.
Mm.
And they're like, oh, okay. And sometimes they ask, well, how much was this worth? How much? And
Yeah.
so they've started to just turn on light bulbs here and there. And some things go right over their head. But
Yeah.
even little things like just marketing. I've included my daughter in one of our videos, and I told her, look, we're going to make a video, and for every 10 likes, I'll give you $1.
Oh.
That was not smart because she told everyone, and we actually included on the video. It was like, hey, my dad said if you like this video.
Oh my God.
And it
How
worked
many
out
likes did
great.
it get?
I can't remember. I paid her a lot of money for a kid. But it was just awesome, right? She was, the video was on house hacking.
Oh, okay.
So she was teaching, this is what.
Oh, I remember that one.
This
Yeah, I
is the
remember
job
seeing
we're
that.
doing,
Yeah.
and this is how you house hack. If you're investing, this is what you might think about. And oh, by the way, Sojo Construction can help you do this, right?
Yeah.
And so it was informative. It was cute, right? It's something that you're willing to watch instead of me explaining that. It's like,
Yeah.
one of a million videos that talks about real estate investing, but it's
Yeah.
a cute little girl doing it. And so they're starting to learn, oh, this is how we make money. I've said on another podcast, you shouldn't investing in things that you don't understand or that you couldn't explain to a 5-year-old kid. And my daughters, we invest in real estate and in Airbnbs, and they understand how that works at a young age of 11, 8. Our 6-year-old doesn't understand, but our 2 oldest girls at least understand, okay, we've got to, find a property, we've got to decorate it, we've got to furnish it. Okay, this is how it works. Someone comes and stays at our house. And even to the point where we tour our cars too.
Oh, yeah.
And, they're like, whoa, why do we have to clean our car? Why is someone else using our car? And I'm like, we were on vacation last week. And I said, well, while we were on this vacation, this is how much we made. Because we cleaned the car, we parked it, they picked it up. We went on vacation, we came back, we picked up the car back, and we made money while we were on vacation. And so they're starting to understand entrepreneurship, how to invest, how we make money. And, I'm just trying to teach them at a young age kind of how entrepreneurship works, and to hopefully start that entrepreneurial spirit at a young age so that they feel like, hey, I want to start this company, I want to do this, and feel like they have the ability to do anything they want.
Well, I love the domino effect that your dad had. I mean, obviously, he probably didn't have, all the knowledge maybe that goes into starting it, but he had the hard work and the grit, right? Which is you need those 2 pillars in order to build something. And so it's amazing to see that kind of like generational change where he had tons of hard work. And like you said, he was pretty stoic, didn't say anything if you griped or whatnot, but he knew that he could just show you through working his butt off. And then you took that, coupled it with a bunch of knowledge that, you were able to get because of what he did. And then now you're reciprocating so much more to your kids through the knowledge so you're doing the hard work, but you're teaching them along the way. That's incredible. Yeah, that's an amazing way to think about it.
I now see through my dad's eyes and his lens of, hey, I'm doing this for you, and I'm trying to pass that on to my kids. Yes, dad is at work all the time. Yes, he pulls out his phone sometimes at my games or during movie nights, or hey, he has to take a call during something that's important for the family. And if you don't explain that to your kids, they think you're just an absent dad, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, dad has to take these calls because we still have to live. We have to pay for bills. We have to pay for everything. Those calls are important.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if I'm being honest, I am scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. But the reality is a lot of the time when I should be at family things and I have to miss or I have to be on a phone call, I try to explain to my kids that this is why dad is not here, is because he's working. And sometimes my daughters will make a comment like, oh, dad, you weren't at my golf tournament. Dad, you weren't at this. And then the interesting thing is one of my other daughters will jump in and say, well, he was working. How do you think we pay for food? How do you think we pay for this? And so it's nice to not have to defend myself.
Yeah.
Because my daughters are understanding, this is how we live. This is how we're able to be provided for, as dad is working. He's not just off somewhere having fun.
Yeah, and I saw, of course, you were at your daughter's golf tournament over at the ranches, right? A couple days ago. And you can be there for a lot of it instead of being there for none of it. And they'll understand that with time as well. I love that. And it's also like your daughters are helping you stay accountable.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like the more people you tell and the more people you teach, the more they're going to hold you accountable to what you say and what you preach.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool. Is like, well, I mean, I told them that I was working, so I better work. That's amazing. Well, my kids are young, 3.5 and 1.5. And so, learning, that helped me so much, what you just said there. That's something that I'm thinking about a lot more now. Because it's true. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of funny, but when I leave the house, for some reason, I can't remember how I formulated this, but my wife one time a long time ago said, sweet, like, go make some money. And then my daughter just repeated, like, go make some money. And I was like, oh, fun. And then somehow that turned into chocolate money, because one time I brought home like little like chocolate gold dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was way more valuable to her than like paper money or anything. So now whenever I leave the house, I go to work, she comes, gives me hugs and a kiss, and she's like, go make some chocolate money. And that's just what we do every single time. And it's funny because there has been times where I'm sitting in my car, right? There are some days where I still go door to door. And just, be a good example to my guys. And it's so funny because I'll be sitting in my car and I'm like, she told me, make some chocolate money today. I better get out there and work my butt off, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not going to be there with her. So I love that. I love that example that you give. So, I mean, Sojo construction, I mean, I can imagine that growing up hating construction, was it a natural transition into Sojo? Was Sojo first, or were the other things first?
Yeah, so that, as I said, I would tell you were crazy if you told me I'd own a construction company and run it, because growing up I hated it, right?
Yeah.
It was just like, what are we doing? And part of the switch in my mind was, I am going to work so hard in the classroom, in sports, and everything else I do, so I never have to do this again.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And it just kind of was, it just was funny that it worked out this way. So I went and I did graduate work at Rice University. I got an MBA there, and part of my second year, I took an entrepreneurship course, and we had to start a company. That was the whole class. It was a lab.
Cool.
The CEO of Blinds.com was our professor.
Oh,
so
wow.
He'd really done it. He'd sold to Home Depot, made a ton of money.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, here's how I did it. Here's the formula. Start your own business. And so I did it, right? And I'm thinking, okay, let's start something cool and sexy like a tech company. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I'm reading in the local paper. Even though we lived in Texas, I'm kind of just staying up on local news. And there's a shortage on construction workers.
Wow.
They were building the new Salt Lake Airport that's there
Yeah.
today,
Hmm.
and they had to give gift cards. I think it was like $50 or $100 to get construction workers to come to work. And I was like,
Crazy.
dude, this is crazy. There's a housing shortage. So it was just
Yeah.
like so many things in construction in Utah that there was a need for. So the demand was there already. And I'm like, okay, well, I can definitely supply this. Like, I know it. I've done it. I've lived it. My dad has many, many relationships. I could just tap into that and build this out. And so, anyways, I built out the company, and I did the assignment just to pass. So I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
here's the articles that prove the demand. I can supply it. I know everything. And
Yeah.
my professor kind of looked at my assignment and was like, why haven't you started this? And I'm like, oh, I thought this was just the assignment. Like, I
Yeah.
put up the business plan, I did everything.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
he's like, how much money do you need to start this? And I said, very little. Like,
Oh,
I could
bootstrapping
start.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, well, I think you should actually do it. So during spring break, I came to Utah and I got all my license, insurance, everything. I took the courses I needed to get
Yeah.
licensed. And then the pandemic hit
Oh.
and everything shut down. And I was like, well, I just dropped a bunch of money to start this company. And this could be potentially the worst time to start a company. And it was just the perfect storm because now
Yeah.
people needed basements, right? They needed more room for their kids because kids were doing school from home.
Yeah.
People couldn't work out anymore. So we needed gyms. And so we
Yeah.
were making gyms. People needed
Holy
a home
cow. Yeah.
office
Yeah.
and they were turning a room into a home office. So we were doing offices. And so we just started pivoting with the market
Yeah.
and it was the next thing, right? It was like,
Wow.
oh, we need an extra room for our kids to do school. Oh, we need a home office. We need a
Yeah.
gym and we need this. And
Yeah.
it kind of turned into, okay, we're going to just do full basements at this point.
Yeah.
We can do everything. So like, we'll just do that. And so we focused on basements. And the reason I chose that was temperature control. You never have to be out in the elements where Utah has snow
Smart. Yeah.
and hot summer. So it's like, I don't want to do that. And
Yeah.
from the story, you know, I hated that. So
Yeah.
like, I'm never going to be in the elements and
Love that.
we can work throughout the year. There's never a
Mm.
slow time because we're always covered. There's always AC
Yeah.
or heat. And so we kind of found our niche and we've kind of pivoted here and there and we've kind of changed it as we've grown. But it all started with a stupid assignment that I wanted to get an A
Yeah.
and just was like, this is what I know. And it actually turned into a real opportunity and it's a real company today.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, I went to BYU and did entrepreneurial management, and
Cool.
I took a class just like that. The company that we made was hilariously dumb, and we actually accidentally published our website, like published it. We were just making a fake one, and someone placed an order, and we're like, "Oh, I guess we technically got a sale." So we just emailed the lady like, "Sorry, like this isn't a real thing," and then she's like, "Well, why?" She emails back like, "Why not?" I'm like, "None of us are passionate about it. It was like
Yeah.
this basketball hoop thing that you could take wherever you want." But it's so cool how you had that guy, like kind of a mentor. Like he's a teacher, but and he turned into a mentor when he pushed you beyond the realm of education,
Yep.
right? Which a lot of great professors do that. And so that's so cool that he's like, why don't you do it? And so I guess you moved. Did you're married at that time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you, I guess during spring break, you moved back to Utah with the full intention of staying in Utah, or
No, just to start the company. I was just
just
like, we'll start it and we'll just see. And then if it's great,
Mhm.
we'll keep trying. And if not, then you know, we at least tried. Well, spring break hit, pandemic hit, and we didn't return to school. So
Oh,
returning back to school was like, oh, we're gonna delay coming back for a week. Oh, 2 weeks, now 3 weeks, now 4 weeks. And then it was like, actually, instead of doing, we're going to finish online. And so,
yeah,
literally, while I was doing work in basements, I had an earpiece in, a headphone, AirPod, listening to class.
yeah.
And then, you know, I had to comment. So, I'm like, yeah, that's a great point, professor, and asking
Yeah.
questions just to participate, and then mute again and back to finishing basement. So, it's just like the perfect storm of like, oh, we don't have to go back to Texas.
Yeah,
We can sit here and we can grow this company, and man, it just things just kind of work and kind of fell
yeah.
our way.
Well, yeah. Once people realized that they didn't have anywhere to go, they started looking more inwards into the home and see where they can add on to it. It's so funny because right when our business is being started, we're almost exactly the same time. I started this business And then COVID hit, and the funny thing was, it was perfect because it was all software, it was online. It freed up a bunch of my time to be able to work on it some more. It ended up not working out for one reason or another. But it's funny because at first we were like, "Crap, COVID's going to tank this." It
Hmm.
actually gives way more time. It's really nice too because it kind of accelerated the decline of the business to the point where we realized we weren't going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes people hang on to a business way too long because they just don't know, they don't have good foresight, and then it takes a long time for it to die. That was like a 6 to 8 month business, I can't remember, that could have been way longer and took way more of my time. But thankfully it didn't. And it's because of the COVID that
Yeah.
we were able to work on for so long. So that's really cool that you had that same kind of experience. Like COVID could suck, but it actually turned out to be a blessing.
Yeah.
So you're out there, and I guess what really intrigued me about what you're doing now, because this is kind of close to present, where it's like you are a founder of a construction company, but you're also doing sales. And a lot of the people who I work with and who listen to this do sales, and they're trying to start something on the side or
Yeah.
transition into their own business. Were you doing Google sales before the Sojo, or?
Yeah. So prior to going and getting an MBA, I was at Workday, another tech company. I was there for 5, 6 years prior, and just got to a point where I just felt stuck. I was managing teams, we were building out new teams, and just felt like, man, I think there's something I need to do more.
Mhm.
And so I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to get an MBA. I'm going to go back and go to school. And so wasn't the tech world before, went back to school, and Google saw my kind of resume of my tech background. And so even before I started my MBA program, they asked me if I'd come in for an interview. And I was like,
Oh.
yes, Google, you just say yes to Google, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And, but the thing that kind of, I guess I had questions about was it was in sales leadership. And I
Ah,
was just like, oh,
you've been doing
I
that for
kind
so
of,
long.
yeah, I kind of want to get out of this. I want to
Yeah.
change. I want to pivot. Um, but I was like, again, you don't say no to Google. And so it ended up working out. So in between your first and second year of your MBA, you have to do an internship if you do the full-time program.
Okay.
And even before the first day of school, I got an offer to go intern at Google. And so I
Wow.
was like, you know what? I'm going to do this internship and figure it out and see if it's worth it. Did the internship. They gave me a full-time offer. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go be a sales leader at Google. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it just kind of was in the mix. I started Sojo Construction. Um, During the pandemic, I had a full year before I had to start at Google,
Oh, nice.
and so I knowing that it gave me a runway of, okay, I've got to build a team around me.
Mm,
I'm not going to be able to do the day to day anymore. I can't do the work anymore. I've got to hire people around me to make decisions as if I were, and to kind of run the operations the day to day.
yeah.
And it just worked out. We hired the right people, and I went to work at Google. The nice thing is it's flexible enough. I
Yeah.
made my own schedule, and it was all remote. There's my team covered basically all of the West, um, and so everything was like, again, I could be on sites, turn my camera off. Google's now watching you like, oh, this is what this guy's doing.
Yeah.
Um, and
What's that noise in the
it just
background?
allowed me flexibility to do that
Yeah.
and kind of do both things. And it's just
Wow.
has kind of grown in both Google and social construction. And a lot of people ask me like, when are you going to leave? And I don't know that there's a perfect timing for it. I think right now both are serving me well.
Hmm.
And so I think when I get to the point where I feel like one is hindering the other,
Yeah.
I'll have to make that decision. And I think ultimately I'll step away from Google at some point,
Hmm.
because I think I'm an entrepreneur at heart and that's where I want to lead. But at
Yeah.
this point, I think both are serving me and my family well.
Hmm.
And we're just to the point where things are working out well, it's growing, and we're happy with it. And until things shift or move, we'll make a
Yeah.
decision when that time comes.
Well, I love that. I think it's super smart. That's one of the things that I've been coached on a couple times as well. Is what, don't leave something that you're super strong at, or don't leave something you're super strong at in hopes of chasing something that seems more glamorous or has a better title,
Yeah.
right? So many sales reps are like, well, I mean, being a regional sales manager or sales representative isn't good enough. I want to be called an entrepreneur. right? And so they put entrepreneur in the title. They're not necessarily entrepreneurs per se. The thing that's interesting is like, man, if you just embrace what you are and you get really, really good at it, then what's the problem? Like you're making more money than most entrepreneurs anyways. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing that's always intrigued me about that. A couple questions before we move on about that transitional period. It's super interesting. So a lot of the times people call themselves entrepreneurs, but when in reality, they're just creating a job for themselves. What do you think kind of the difference is? I mean, you mentioned the systems in place and everything like that, but like what's like the mentality difference between creating a job for yourself and being an entrepreneur?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever gotten that before, but um, I, 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 I don't know that I could tell you the difference. I think a lot of entrepreneurs just do that, where they're in the day to day doing the job.
Yeah.
Um, I think the entrepreneur is having a vision, creating it, and then bringing in people who can execute on the things that they need done. Um, I can't do everything on my own, and so I've got to hire out. And I think that was the hardest thing for me initially, was delegating.
Oh.
I wanted all control. It was like, I've invested this time and money and this effort. My family needs to eat, and so it
Yeah.
was like, how can I trust someone to do this part of the business? How can I trust someone to do this?
Yeah.
And I think if you set expectations well, you have a system in place, a process in place, and then you hold them accountable to it, it ends up working out. And so I don't know that there's a real big difference.
Mhm.
I probably created another job for me, to be honest, but
No, I mean, those four things that you just said are amazing there. I mean, real quick, expectations, that's one that I don't hear people emphasize a whole bunch. So, what do you mean by, I shouldn't say what do you mean, but when you say create expectations, do you mean like when you're employing them, or like after you employed them, you're creating expectations on like just their job requirements, or is there more to that?
yeah, it's just part of your onboarding, right?
Hmm.
You're coming in as an employee for me. Here's your expectations. This is what I've hired you to do. This is what you're accepting. We're all aligned on this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you achieve your job description.
Do you also give them kind of like expectations on what the company is and where the company's at? For example, you never want to like hire on an employee and say, "Hey, make the company sound like super big and fabulous and everything's perfect," and then they come on to find it's a startup.
Yeah,
So is that some of the expectations you set too?
for sure. And
Yeah.
and some of it is, here's where we're at today and here's where the dream is. So that
Mhm.
they can see these are why he's making the decisions and taking the steps that we are.
Yeah.
Because employees will always have questions of like, why are we doing this? It's like, this is so dumb. Like, why
Yeah.
are we doing this instead of this? And as I said before, we've had to pivot so many times. So people
Yeah.
were probably like, why are we doing home offices now? Like, we're not a home office company.
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing gyms? Like,
Yeah.
this is so dumb. Like,
Yeah.
but if they could see the vision and where we're going and what the 10-year, what the ultimate goal looks like,
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, okay, I can see the intentionality behind all of the decisions. And so I've tried never to overpromise,
That's good.
but to also share the dream of, hey, this is where I think we're going. If you're loyal, we'll keep you on as long as you want to.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity to grow.
Mhm.
As we grow, we'd love to have you move along. If it's not the right fit, that's okay. But here's your expectations today. If you prove well, we can grow that and we can give you
Yeah.
more responsibility, and that also equates to more pay.
Yeah. But one of those four things you said as well is vision, and you mentioned it a couple of times. So, out of curiosity, when you're starting a new company, right? You at the beginning you have this overarching vision of what you want to accomplish, but I don't think I've ever heard a business owner say that they didn't pivot at least once. Sometimes the pivots are so big, it's almost like you're starting a new company. And did you have to change your vision? I mean, I'm curious because sometimes a vision will change as well, and you have to relay that, and I guess kind of resell or reinstitute a vision to your people below. Did you ever have that experience, or
All the time,
yeah,
all the time, right? It was like, hey, remember when I said this is what we were doing? That's changed, right? The market has changed, the
yeah,
demand has changed. We don't need gyms anymore. This
Mhm.
is what we're going to, right?
Yeah.
And it's continued to pivot, but I think the core values of the company that you found, like, those never really change, right?
Oh, okay.
Those things are just principles you live by, and this is what this company is built on. The way you get there might be a little bit different, right?
So it's kind of a combination on having a vision and having values and making sure the values echo what the vision is and probably vice versa. So that way the vision is important, but it can change a little bit here and
Yeah.
there. But you would never want to change a company's values, huh?
Yeah, I think
That makes sense.
honestly, and that's something I learned from Google is I think they're the best company at living their core values.
Ah,
Um, I mean,
yeah.
it's not something that's just on a wall. It's in almost every meeting. It's on like every email, every report, I mean, it's in everything they do. And I think that's the thing that I've tried to emulate with Sojo Construction is
Mm.
we won't be perfect at a lot of things,
Yeah.
but these are the things that we'll live by. And I think that's something I learned at Google. And we don't really shift the vision. It might change a little bit how we get there, but
Yeah.
it's the core values and the vision are kind of just aspirational.
Yeah.
The steps we get there change all the time.
Is there any lesson that you feel like you've learned, or one of the biggest takeaways that you've gained from starting in sales, transitioning to entrepreneurship, and then kind of like the relationship between the two?
I mean, sales is the most important job.
Okay.
There's the reason why they're the highest paid in companies.
Mhm.
If you don't sell, you don't have a company, and so um, that's my job. That's the thing that I'm good at. That's the thing that brings in the money,
Yeah.
and so I can hire out all the processes, all the paperwork, all the accounting, all the
Yeah.
taxes, I mean, just
Yeah.
everything, the scheduling, and all of that. I need to win the sell, and then I hand it over to my team that can do the rest, right? So, um, I think sales is the thing that I've learned is I can't be bogged down by everything else, or we don't make money.
Mm.
And unless I can replace myself, which I've tried before,
Yeah.
it hasn't worked out yet. I just haven't found someone who can go and get all the business, get all the work.
Yeah.
I've got to do that and do nothing else. And so I guess that would be the second thing is as a CEO, as a founder, figure out what you're best at. What are your strengths? Is it the vision? Is it the execution? Is it sales? Is it actually doing the work and hire everything out?
Mm.
Everything else, like you should not be bogged down by it. And I've a lot of my entrepreneur friends, I've had to teach them this lesson because they're like,
Oh.
I want control over everything. I'm going to do all of the accounting. I'm doing the payroll. I want to see what's coming in and what's going out. And it's like, I know how that feels.
Yeah.
And if you're making 20 grand, you want to see it come in, you want to process it, you want to pay everyone out. And at the end of the day, you're like, man, my bank account reads that and I feel good about that.
Yeah.
It's like, but how long did that take you? And how much money did that actually produce? And it's like, you've got to do revenue generating activities versus processes.
Well, you find out what the true value of your time is, right? When you become an entrepreneur, especially at the beginning when the revenue, is sometimes slow or it's coming in and you're putting in hours and hours and hours. At the beginning, your time is worth very little technically when you're starting a company. But as you grow that company, it becomes more and more valuable. And then hopefully you get to the point where you say, hey, anytime I put in towards this company needs to be maximized because the revenue or the money that comes from it needs to be worth it, I suppose. What do you say to those people who could, I mean, there's a lot of people who say like, oh, like if you're a salesman, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can start a company, right? And so I guess, were there any specific things you had to like kind of teach yourself or learn on the process to like starting a company? I guess, again, you did go to the MBA program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that gave me a lot of the breadth and depth of business principles. Like, hey, these are all the things that make up a company. And these are all things you should be thinking about: supply chain, finance, accounting, sales, marketing, operations. And then once you figure out, okay, here's all the pieces, where does my company fall in all of this? Is it something that's super important? How important is supply chain? It doesn't matter. I'm going to just pay a supplier. Yes, that's our whole business. So
Yeah.
I think it gave me the breadth and depth of here's what I need. Here are the core areas that I need to focus on, and then figuring out, okay, what does my business need and what's most important, um, and then what's going to bring in money and what's going to make sure that there's consistent revenue coming in based off of all of those areas. What are the
Yeah.
activities we need to prioritize? What are areas that we need to either sub out or pay out, hire someone, a independent contractor just to run that piece.
Yeah.
And then you figure out what your business really is.
Mm.
And I think you can get lost in being an entrepreneur, especially in the early days of what you actually do as a company.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you want to be everything to everyone. And unless you figure out, oh, we're actually a sales company, or we're actually a data company, an information company, you can get lost in the operations or the supply chain or marketing, and that's not actually what you do.
Yeah.
And so I've been lost in a lot of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once you figure out this is what we do and this is how we bring in revenue, then you can focus on that and you can hire everything out.
Wow, I really like that. And I guess another kind of question that stems from that too is, for someone who doesn't have the opportunity to go to school, because there's so many kids out there, or kids, there's so many younger guys and gals that want to start companies and they don't necessarily go to university or whatnot. I mean, is this something that you think could be learned on YouTube and Google or in podcasts, or what would you, where would you point someone who is thinking of learning and on how to become an entrepreneur, how to start a company?
Yeah, I would say absolutely it could be learned on YouTube and Google, but I would say the best learning happens when you're hands-on and you're actually doing it.
Mm.
So I would couple both of them, of actually starting and doing it, and then doing your research as questions come up.
Yeah.
I think the people who get stuck in the analysis paralysis of like, oh, I have to have all of these 10 or 100 things done and understood and learned and hired out before I start, those are the entrepreneurs who are really entrepreneurs because they never get there. They actually never start it. Mm-hmm. And by the time they've done all their research of those 100 things, it's like they've convinced themselves that they're not going to do it. It's like, oh, I don't have that. Oh, and then it's just man, I had that great idea. I was the guy who came up with that, but I just never started it.
But it's also tough because they think that they have this unbelievable sight into what a company would need, and they kind of funnel their idea down to the point where it's like, nah, it won't work. It's like, man, when you take an action, you don't know what the result's going to be in entrepreneurship. Yeah. You don't. I mean, in sales, you kind of can. You can get to the point where you're so good at sales that you can predict the objection. You could predict it. But this isn't sales. In sales, it's like a container. Let's say that you're in someone's home, right? Or you're on the phone with them. There's a container set. You're only talking about the one thing that you're talking about. It can deviate a little bit, but you can bring them back to the sales process. It's very simple. With entrepreneurism, there's nothing simple about it. It's like a huge spider web, and you could go one of a billion different ways, and you can end up at Z instead of A. And so I like what you're saying there, where it's like you have to take action. And I'm realizing more that when people say that, they mean you have to take action because you don't know what's going to follow. You think you do, but you don't. Yeah. People are going to react differently. The market's going to react differently. And that's another thing too. There's so many factors that you can't control, like the market, for example, that unless you take action, you will never know. Yeah. And you won't even have that foresight into knowing what could happen if you start. And that's another thing that I think a lot of guys don't understand too, is like the only way that you get that really good intuition in sales, for example, that you can predict is because you fail a billion times. Mm-hmm. And then they go to start a company and they feel like they can carry it over. It's like, no, you have to fail quite a few times in entrepreneurship too. And I'm sure you could think of a couple different examples of different ways that maybe you tried something entrepreneurial or you did something out of your comfort zone, business related, and failed in right before you started Sojo. Yeah. And so that's, I feel like it's a really good lesson learned from your experience right there. Well, it's so funny because it's as if you didn't have enough on your plate, 4 kids, a business, and sales. And then you decide, I feel like this state needs something more. So you're in politics now. And how long have you been in politics for?
Oh, let's see. I announced in December. It was maybe a couple months before that I actually decided I was going to run. So I don't know, 7 to 9 months.
So I gotta know, and I guess maybe this is my bad because I'm not huge into listening to a lot of political things. But okay, so 7 to 9 months. So maybe last September is when you started thinking about it. Before last September, were you a political guy? Did you talk to people about your political opinion and ask them what theirs were? Did you repost political stuff on your Instagram? How did you get to that point?
I never spoke politics.
Okay.
I never posted anything political, really,
Yeah.
unless it was like safe, right? It was
Sure.
like the safe thing. Like everyone agreed that this was bad.
Yeah, I just
Like,
did that
sure.
the other day. It was the safest political thing I've
Yeah.
ever posted.
And everyone's like, "Yep, everyone agrees." So I was like the safest person, and I think because in sales, especially when you work at a big company, anything that you post publicly, it's like, "Whoa, this guy!"
Yeah.
Like, if it's on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and on because in my job and field, when I'm selling to CEOs, to any leader of a company, I'm looking up their Facebook, their Twitter,
Yeah.
their Instagram, their LinkedIn. I want to see what they're reposting, and I want to get to know who they are before I have a conversation, so that
Yeah.
I know, okay, this is where we click. So
Well, also to add to that too, I mean, anything that you say or do is a direct influence on your business because you are your business. Business is you. Did that play into it as well?
absolutely, because I mean, there were times during the pandemic where politics was on display everywhere,
Yeah.
and in a different sense, it wasn't like, "Are you Republican or Democrat?" It was like, "Are you guys gonna wear masks when you
Yeah.
do my basement?" And it's like, how do I answer this? Like, right? So it's like I can either say yes or no, but we actually, I made the decision, the hard decision, like we can't do construction in masks. It's just not going to work out.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, we're actually not gonna do that. And so if we're doing your basement, you can come down at any point you want, but just know that our workers will not be wearing masks.
Yeah.
And I took a hard line on that, and we lost a lot of money and a lot of business because people were like, "You're endangering people. This is crazy."
Yeah.
And so we took. I think that was kind of the first political stance that I'd taken.
Yeah.
That I was like, you know what, like, yes, I believe that people are getting sick. The pandemic is real, but we have to do work, and I have to provide for families. And if we don't do the work properly and it takes us longer, I've got to pay. We're losing money. We don't have business. And
Yeah.
that's how many jobs of people who are depending on us. And so
Yeah.
I just said, look, I'm going to take the hard stance and do that. But anyway, so I think to answer your original question, it wasn't super political. Involved, yes. I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
I'd helped small campaigns here and there, but not anything crazy. And the funny thing is, all of my friends prior to me announcing in December, I don't think many of them, other than my really close friends, would even actually know what my political affiliation was.
Oh, you were that kind of just biased about it.
Yeah, I mean, they could have a conversation. I could have the most liberal friends have a conversation, and we'd talk about things,
Yeah.
and they would be like, "Whoa, he's this."
Yeah.
And the most conservative friends could have a conversation, and they also would be like, "Oh, he's this," but we could just have good exchange. And
Yeah.
so
That's a good sign though.
it was interesting to jump into this world and knowing my stances, my views are going to be on public display for anyone to attack, for friends to understand, to know, customers to see. I mean, even at Google, people look me up.
Yeah.
They Google me, and some people are like, "Oh, I noticed that you're running," and some people, are like, "Hey, I'm supportive," and some customers have donated, some have come to fundraisers,
Cool.
and some just stay quiet about it. And I
Yeah.
know, oh, I'm running, and we've stopped the discussion there, and it's like, okay, well, we disagree on things, and that's okay. But I just think at this point in the world, in history, in the U.S. and in Utah, it's too important now just to stay quiet. And I love the comfort of just being everyone's friend and everyone liking you, and just kind of being the person who agreed with everyone. But I just think the future of our kids and the world that we introduce them into and we leave behind to them and our future generations is too important just to agree with everyone and say, hey, I'm just going to keep these views deep in my soul and in my mind, never going to share it. And that's what it got to the point was I've either got to put up or shut up, and
Oh,
I just was like I can't complain anymore unless I'm willing to actually do something about it.
wow. I mean, there's a lot of different levels that doing something about something. That's a
Yeah.
pretty big level. And so I guess, was there just back at that time, was there just like a spot that could be filled? And you said, hey, I might as well go from A to Q really fast and jump into it? Or were originally you kind of thinking like, like, so I guess I should say the spark that happened in like September, was it the fact that there was a spot in not Congress, right?
The Utah
Sorry.
House.
Utah House, thank you, goodness gracious, Congress. Was there a spot that opened up and there was running and you said, huh, that's something that I feel like I could fill a role in? And that's kind of what sparked the.
So that would be the smart thing, is to wait for an open seat. That's what most people do.
Oh, okay.
But again, this wasn't something that was on my radar. If you asked, like about 5 years ago, I'd been involved in student politics. I've been
Oh,
student body president, and I did all of high school, all 3 years
nice.
of high school. I was in student government. I was a student body president at Utah State University 2 years. I was the
Wow.
second in history, 125 years to serve 2 years. As a part of that, I served as the Utah Student Association president 2 years. So basically, all the student body presidents of all the higher ed institution, colleges, universities have a board, and I was the president of that board.
Wow.
And then I went to Rice, and my wife was like, "Hey, let's just chill. Let's just go to school.
Yeah.
We have a family. Just go to class, come home, and
Yeah.
we'll just do that."
Yeah.
And of course, I found an issue that I was like, this is stupid. And the issue was the swag that our college had was crazy expensive. And I'm like,
Oh, really?
dude, this shirt should cost $10 and you're charging me 30. Like, this is stupid. And
Yeah.
because it says, and I'm like, how do I get this cheaper? So I ordered our own. I was like, okay, how do I get approval for logo usage?
Mhm.
I'm going to go look at suppliers. I'm going to get them to print on it, and then I'm going to sell it cheaper to students.
Nice.
And everyone's like, you've got to run for president. And I'm like, I just wanted cheaper swag.
They called you out.
And I was like, freak. So I ran again.
Yeah.
I won.
Because you make stuff happen.
Yeah,
When
so
you make something happen, they want you to keep making things happen, huh?
Yeah. So
That's crazy.
that's the same spark that happened locally.
Wow.
Obviously, I have young kids in elementary school. The big hot topic kind of last year and the year before was school choice. That's kind of been the big debate in the nation and really in Utah, which is we're all taxpayers. If you own property and you pay income tax, and there's taxes that go to education.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parents who've pulled their kids from school and are like, I actually don't like what's being taught in schools. I want to homeschool, or I actually want to go to a charter school that I agree with their views, or I want to go to a private school that I agree with. School choice, essentially what it allows you to do as a taxpayer is if you have kids in school, you get a certain scholarship or voucher, not equal to the taxes, but a certain part of it that you can then delegate to go to a private school. Or I can say, actually, I want to homeschool my kid and I want to use those funds to pay for the curriculum or pay for them to take these courses and classes outside of public
So
school.
they're like giving you your taxes back to spend it on different, like, because the taxes that we pay is mainly just for public schools.
Just public school.
So they're like, hey, because you can't not pay the taxes in. So they said, we'll give you some of the money back so you can go and apply it to where you want to.
And what it does is it just gives parents more choice.
Sure.
Right? And the thing is, you can have polar views on each side, but as a parent, as parents, we know that every kid is different. My first daughter, she's super athletic. She's hands-on. If you sit her down in front of a piece of paper and say, do these 30 math problems or read this book and answer these questions after it, she'll do okay, but she doesn't thrive there.
Mm-hmm.
If you put something in her hands and she's playing with blocks or something, right away she's like, oh, this was easy. I can do that.
Yeah.
Right? I have another kid who's very, very creative. And so if we're doing art-centered, things that teach her math or science or whatever, she immediately gets it. But sitting down for 5 minutes, she can't sit still, right?
Yeah.
So as a parent, sitting them in a classroom of 30, 40, 50 kids, whatever the classroom size is, and teaching them the same way as everyone else, I just tend to believe that our kids need different
Yeah,
options.
I
And
agree
I
100%.
believe as a parent, as a taxpayer, I should have the ability to choose, okay, this is the best for my kids. This
Yeah.
is where they're going to learn and thrive the most. But even in today's world, um, this is not a political podcast, but
Yeah,
I
I'm with
think
you.
on a public stage, you saw the opening ceremonies
Yeah.
of the Paris Olympics, and there's been a lot of
Oh man.
arguments
Yeah.
and what they did and what they displayed, offending 2 billion Christians on
Yeah.
earth, and
When Russell Brand makes a video that I agree with about something like that, I'm like, what's happening in this world, dude? Like, and he even mentioned in the video about the last time he did something back in 2012. He's like, I'm a completely different person because he's completely turned his life to Christ.
yeah,
He says, but I couldn't believe it. And the funny thing is, I didn't watch the entire opening ceremonies or anything like that. And so I saw his video. I'm like, what's that picture of like the thing? I was like,
yeah.
and then he goes into detail. I'm like, that happened. Now I wouldn't have known. But now that I know, literally, it's funny you brought this up. I'm like, babe, did you see this? She's like, yeah. I'm like, that kind of pisses me off. She's like, what are you gonna do? Boycott the Olympics? I'm like, no, but she's like, are you gonna do what your dad did, like boycott Disney? I'm like, no, but man, what could I do?
And
I didn't know. And the funny thing
and
is, I still don't know.
and it's not even a Christian thing, even though we're both Christians.
Yeah,
It's if you attack any religion like that,
yeah,
like
that's not
it's just
cool.
silly, right? It's
Yeah,
just so you see what's happening in the world. There's a shift of things being attacked, and
yeah,
I have values. We talked about core values of business. I have values that I hold with my family,
hmm,
and there's being a shift in what's okay and to be taught in schools and public and online and in movies and TV shows and cartoons even. And so
yeah,
it just is getting to a point where it's not only choosing the school that aligns with their learning style, but also your
mhm,
values
yeah,
as a parent, because it's shifting so much
yeah,
that I want the ability as a taxpayer, as a citizen of Utah and of America, to say, nope, I actually don't agree with that. That's not what Paris Olympics, or that's not what this they should have done. I
yeah.
actually want to take my dollars to support this who actually aligns with my values. And
Hmm,
I,
interesting.
the the person who was in seat actually voted against this bill. And so when I'd seen that, I was like, this is crazy. Like, why would
Wow.
you be against that? This seems like such a like easy decision. Like, yeah, we want to support parents' involvement in education. We want them to have a choice. And so that's kind of what sparked it, was
Yeah,
voted against it. And I was like, we've got to find someone to run against him.
yeah.
And it got to the point where people were like, well, why aren't you running? Like, and it was kind of the don't complain unless you're willing to do something about it. And
Yeah,
I was like, you know what? I'm gonna freaking run.
yeah,
And then we had to go through the process of like, wait, are you gonna do it? Is your wife okay with it? How is this gonna affect your family?
yeah,
The attacks on social media, your views are on display. Is that gonna, your business? Is that gonna affect it? Working at a big corporation that's public and tends to have different views than you politically. How does this affect it? And we went through our process of praying and fasting and going through our spiritual process and figuring out what's the right decision for us. And
yeah,
just got to the point where I was like, look, again, doing things for my kid. One, I want to hand them the world in a better place, but also I also want them to see and look at their dad and say, my dad stood up for what he believed in.
uh-huh.
And I want them to enter rooms and their life to say, you know what, that's not right. And I want to stand up for what I believe in. And so
Wow.
I'm I'm hoping hopefully I'm teaching that, and it's just been awesome taking my kid. We've talked about how I'm including my kids in the business,
Yeah,
but even in politics, man, my kids are loving it. They're enjoying
yeah.
it. They've gone to, I've sat in 50 plus living rooms with voters, and my kids are sitting right next to me,
Well, I saw you
and
went
we're
door to
talking
door, like
politics.
flyering with the kids.
Yeah.
How amazing, right?
So we're just teaching them civic engagement. I've said this previously on other podcasts. If nothing else comes from this campaign, my kids will be raised to be civically engaged. They will understand how things get done, how laws are passed in Utah, how to affect, voter turnout, and how to get the word out, and how to do all those things. And so again, I think as a father, I'm trying to just pass down as much knowledge and as much experience as I can at a young age to my kids, so that when they get to that age, it's like, I can run for anything I want to. I can do
Yeah.
whatever I want. I can change whatever I want, and kind of give them the world at their fingertips and allow them to become who they want to become.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, you said something a little bit ago that really intrigued me. You talked about the values, right? Like, hey, we don't, our values don't align, so I'm going to take my money and put it somewhere else. So, do you think, and I guess we can cut any of this out that you want to,
Sure,
it's kind of a pretty blunt question, but do you think that our, like the Republican Party, Independent, and the Democratic parties, do you think they are based around the actual values that are kind of assigned to those parties, or do you think it's gotten to the point now where politics has been so gamified that it's led to kind of indirect or direct corruption to the point where no, values doesn't really play a difference into whether or not someone's with a different party? It's more of okay.
I think there's a little bit of both. There's been a lot of money and power that have gamified politics today. I mean, I hate to get political on a non-political
Hey,
podcast,
it's my podcast. Let's do it.
but you invited me, and I'm here.
This is the most political I'll probably ever get, so I'm loving it.
We see a party basically nominate a candidate with zero voice of the electorate. No citizen voted for Kamala Harris. And Biden dropped out just at the opportune moment where it was like, hey, we need a candidate. And then the powers, the money all jump behind one candidate and say, this is who our candidate's going to be, without the voice of any Democrat. No primary had voted for her.
Wow.
So when you talk about gamification, everyone knew where Biden's health was and where his mind was.
Yeah.
And everyone, after the first debate, is now acting like this was breaking news. Like, whoa, we had no idea that he was old.
Yeah.
And he wasn't all there.
Yeah.
And then you have the Democrat Party pick a candidate. To say that the Republican Party or independents or any other political party is perfect, that's silly, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not just pointing fingers at them. There's things.
But right now, it's the most prevalent and recent, frankly, display of, okay, this isn't like perfect timing here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a quick question, I guess, from personal experience is like, when I see something along the lines that Biden is going to debate Trump, a guy like me is like, again, kind of regard this, but I'm like, why the crap would he do that? So, in curiosity for people who are kind of just like, again, I'm conservative, but people who are kind of indifferent, they don't do like a lot of studying and stuff like that. If I ever get this intuition, like, why the heck would anyone do that, regardless of the party? What does that say? Is that a bad thing? Or is that usually say a little bit more about them and their bad decisions and maybe something's up? Or does it say more about me, like, oh, you really don't understand what you're doing?
No, I think you've got to trust your gut and your instinct on a lot of things, like political.
Yeah.
The fact that we were all thinking that is like, why? And then also the debate happens in June, which debates never happen.
Never happen.
So it's like, why is this all happening now? And so, we can jump into conspiracies. I don't think that's very beneficial for this podcast, but
that's good.
There's weird things happening, right?
Yeah.
And it's all adding up. And so when you talk about gamification, do I believe it's happening? Absolutely. Like, how do you have someone wait until the very end to then announce? And that's the only way that I believe that Kamala Harris becomes their nominee,
right?
Is you've got to wait, because if they open that gate, you have probably 10 to 12 Democrat candidates who are running, and I don't think Kamala Harris comes out of that as the nominee. So, gamification, yes, it definitely happens everywhere, but I think what's more important is, and why I'm running is, I believe that there's still an opportunity for grassroots to really affect change. Yes, on a federal level, it's a little bit harder, but even more so on your city level, your county level, and your state level. Like, I mean, you could run. Anyone can run.
Yeah.
Like, you could decide, like, you know what? Actually, I don't like what's happening in my city or in my state. I'm actually going to run. And you can figure out what district you live in, who's in office, and you can run against them. Or if there's an open seat, you can run for that. Yeah. And you don't have to run. That's a great way. But also voting, donating to campaigns, knocking doors for people, handing out flyers. there's so much that you can do to support people that align with your values.
Well, it's interesting because a couple of those things you can do kind of in secret, and a couple of them is right. So you like donating and voting. No one needs to know.
Yep.
And you can do that by yourself. And then you also mentioned flyering, talking about it. Those are things that are outward. And so it's kind of cool that we have options of both, right?
Absolutely.
It's funny when you pointed at me and said you could run. I got like chills, dude. I was like, oh, I was like not good ones. Like, oh, I don't know
But
about that.
that's where it all starts, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think 90 high percentage of people don't believe that they can make a difference. And I think everyone who's sitting in that seat, when you point and say, hey, you can run, you should run, they feel that. And that's that like initial like, oh, I don't know. But if you then look at a contrast, like, what am I running for? Is it worth that? I got to that point where I'm like, yes, it's worth my kids' future. Yes, it's having a say on what's being taught in schools and what's being taught to our kids. Yes, it's important to have a say on where our taxes go and what programs, are going to help Utah continue to thrive. Yes, it is important for small businesses and laws that create regulation that make it harder for entrepreneurs and business owners to thrive and to grow their companies. So there's so many things that affect our day-to-day that happen in local politics that even just knowing the issues and writing a short email or shooting a text to your local representatives or your city council members, it goes a long way. And very, very few people do it. And it's usually the same people, and they're usually the loud and annoying people that your representatives are like, oh, not this person again.
Yeah.
They have the same issue. They talk about it. So for the average Joes, especially entrepreneurs who are listening, your business is affected by the laws that are created, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's laws every year, hands down, that affect small businesses. And if you were just to know what those laws are, you could talk to your local representative and say, hey, are there any laws that affect a construction company? I'm a construction company owner. Is there any laws that are coming down that I should be aware of? Yeah. That's as simple. Or you can go to the government website. Every bill is posted on there, and you can just read the titles and figure it out. Solar is a hot topic every year, right? Yeah. Regulation and incentives and credits is always discussed. And so your business could be completely obsolete next year, right? They say, oh, no more credits. This is what solar is. Or they can say, we're actually going to go with only regular heating and cooling. And so no more solar power in Utah. And if you're not aware of that as a business owner, you can get screwed and you would have no idea. And it's too late then after you decide a law is created. And so I just think it's so important to be involved and to be in the know. Add it to your reading. You're listening to podcasts, you're scrolling through news, add your local newspapers to it, and even scroll the Utah government websites to it so you can see what bills are coming and just say like, hey, did you know that this law is being passed about parks or about transit or about schools or about food taxes?
Well, because very often people will think, oh, I live, because I'm in Texas right now, but in Utah, oh, I'm in a conservative state. Like, I'm conservative. I live in a conservative state. Everything that's going to be passed is going to be what I agree with, which is so dumb. Yeah. Like, I've realized that's so dumb because Texas is a very complicated, massive state where I even just saw Austin, of course, has become very different than the rest of Texas recently. And they passed something. I was like, I can't believe that got passed down there. And it made me start questioning, I wonder if anything's been passed recently in Fort Worth that would make me question something. And the more I talk to people about it, that does happen. And I think it's important for people, like you said, who understand the rules and laws of their business. I think a lot of times and actually you mentioned this earlier, one of the first things you did when you were starting your company was getting licensed, understanding the laws and regulations around it. And I think a lot of people skip that process. And maybe they think that because they're an online coach, that there is no laws around it. Actually, there is. If you're soliciting money online, there are ways to do it and ways where you'll get flagged and your entire account is banned and you just lost out on opportunity. And so I do think what you're saying is extremely important, that first, you should understand the laws that are already in place. And second, you absolutely should be up to date with the laws that are coming through.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple situations that I can in the solar industry alone that has greatly impacted me over the past few years. That thankfully, through just one of the news outlets, and frankly, guys, even if you're just following the right accounts on Instagram,
Yeah.
like I follow Fort Worth News, and it gives me a lot of amazing information that I wouldn't know otherwise from anything else. And so I think what you're kind of saying is take an active, like you said, put it into your research, right? Podcast, Instagram, take an active role in finding things that apply to you that come from politics and politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you talk about the state of Utah being very conservative and thinking, oh, well, everything is going to be passed conservative. Well, there's also cities that you pay city taxes to, and also counties. And so those are important to like figure out because they have, multi-million dollar / billion-dollar budgets that they run off of. And those are taxes you're paying and I'm paying, right? And it's not always conservative. A lot of these councils don't have to post their political affiliation. There's school boards that affect your everyday decisions and where taxes of education taxes go. And so I know it's boring and it's not sexy. It's not cool to do, and it's not even cool to know. But I would say when it comes to taking in information, especially as an entrepreneur, as a business person, man, it makes a whole world of difference if you know what's going on, and then also you can prepare yourself, right? If you can pivot, there's a law coming down that it's going to pass. It's like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do this. We're going to pivot because we got to prepare for the new law that's going to be passed in January. So,
and you're gonna pass up so many people who aren't doing that in your industry too. You want a competitive advantage? That's one way to do it. And the funny thing is, I was thinking as you were saying that, for some reason, the idea in my mind popped in, like, well, what are some of the reasons that maybe I've told myself in the past, or people would tell themselves that it's not worth it? The one thing that you mentioned was they don't think that they can actually make a change. I do think that that is prevalent. But let's say it's something that's like kind of important or nagging at them, and they learn about a bill that's going to be passed. What's interesting is I feel like if you're a business owner or a parent, those are two, if you're either of those two things, you probably have at least one reason to care about the things that are passed in your area. When you say, I mean,
absolutely.
if you're a single Joe, then okay, maybe not. You can move wherever you want, move to another county super fast. But if you're a business owner or a parent, I can promise you, you have a reason.
Yeah, there's 500 to 600 bills passed every year in Utah, and there's different committees that these bills come through. If you're a parent, you could just go sit in the education subcommittee and hear issues that are coming. Right? We want a law to ban this. We want a law to create this, and some things come with great intention, but the implementation of it is, oh, we're paying extra amount of taxes, but look at this implementation, right? It's like, why are we paying that if it's not actually doing what it's supposed to? If you're a business owner, you can go sit in business and labor and just figure out and hear all of the business bills and laws that are being created every year, or you can just look at what's on their agenda. And so it's the reason why these large companies pay millions and millions and millions of dollars for lobbyists is because they don't have the time to do it. They pay someone to know what bills are coming through and to lobby on behalf of it, and then to be the force behind it. And so,
well, to kind of wrap up and just a little bit of a tangent from this, I was curious. In your experience, right? You've had months now where you have been a political figure, and you're still a business owner, right? You're not out of business. What are some of the lessons that you've learned since becoming, a political face and having your politics on display? What are some of the things that you've learned that have happened to your business since then?
yeah, I think taking a stance, people look up to it, even if they disagree, right? I think people realize that politics is in a weird place right now, and even if they don't agree with me, they respect it. And you've obviously got to be respectful and cordial the way that you handle yourself, but I think it definitely hasn't hurt my business at all.
Oh, okay.
If anything, it's helped it, and it's people see the courage in what you're doing and standing up for what you believe in, and sometimes have to agree to disagree, but ultimately they're like, hey, this is awesome. Like, you're an example to me because I'm afraid to post those things online, or I'm afraid to actually vocalize what I believe in. And
Wow.
I think sometimes we get stuck in the party system, and it's like you believe everything that the Democrats believe, you believe everything that Republicans believe. The reality is there's different issues.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different opinion on every issue. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot that we actually agree on different sides of the aisle that I think we like to say, oh, the other party's so bad and we're so different.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's a lot of issues we agree on,
Hmm.
and sometimes the D and the R can get in the way of it. And so
Yeah.
I think as I've showcased who I am as a real person, people, are willing to still be a customer to my business because they're like, oh, well, that's just Doug.
Yeah.
Like he's just a normal Joe
Hmm.
deciding to throw his hat in the ring, and
Well, there's
and
got to
that's
be
okay.
something really valuable that comes from people doing business with you and they really know you.
Yeah.
Like they know who you are, what your values are, what you stand for, regardless of the politics. That's got to be extremely valuable. Well, I feel like I very rarely have political conversations, but when it's with someone who knows what the heck they're talking about, I'm a lot more open because I feel like it's something that can be learned instead of just an opinion. So, I mean, you have my full support, even though I live in Texas, support you as much as I can.
Yeah.
Where can people go to like help you, support you, or even just to learn more about your message?
Yeah, DougFiefia.com is my website. Feel free to go there. You can look at the issues, my stances. You can sign up to volunteer, or you can donate if you'd like to. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, uh, Twitter, or X, basically on all platforms. And
Yeah.
follow the journey, right? And I think one thing that I've done different than most politicians is I don't have a separate account. I
Hmm.
don't have a candidate, and people like to separate that. And I'm like, even if I lose, I'm not going to delete that. That's part of who I am, and I want to show people the real me and who they're voting for. Is because this is not something that I've had planned, and I have this separate agenda and this kind of different person. Like, I'm a family man first. I'm a man of God. I'm a business owner and a community member, and I want to showcase that. That's who you're voting for. It's not some political figure that always says the right things. I'm on podcasts all the time, and I just got eaten alive online for something I said, and I ate it, and I own it, and I still
Yeah.
agree with everything that I said. But there was a lot of people who disagreed with me, a lot of people who agreed with me, and that's the thing that I promise people is that you're always going to get the real from me. If you
Mhm.
disagree with me, I respect your viewpoint, but I'm always going to be real and be who I am. Getting into politics, you can always change.
Yeah.
People get self-interested, they change. There's money, there's power.
Yeah.
I will always be real and be myself. And if you like it, great, vote for me. If you don't, vote against me.
Yeah.
That's fine too. Like, that's the
Yeah.
great country we live in, is the
Yeah.
ability to choose who our leaders are. And I'm going to showcase the real me, and um, whether I win or lose, I'll always be true to who I am and my core values.
Awesome. What a great message, man. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, you man. Thanks.
Awesome.